Marc, I am going to ask you to take over and let me introduce you.
Okay.
So, Marc Laventure is our next speaker. Keep sharp objects away, because if you cut Marc, he'll bleed Red Bull. Scalar.com is thriving, and Marc is fueling himself on caffeine. But don't worry, Marc has been through the startup process before. As you mentioned, Marc, right? You sold Launcher Code a few years ago. Well done. Congratulations. Absolutely awesome. And you get addicted to startups, don't you, right? You just have to keep doing them again and again. I'm personally delighted to hear that Scalar.com is doing so well. And, well, I'm going to claim a little credit, right? Because it really kicked off after you did the podcast, right?
Yeah, those two are at the same timeline, same related.
Exactly, yeah. So if you want to promote your developer relations startup, we're the podcast to be on. We are welcoming Marc from Canada. He is going to lead a discussion on open source LLMs. And, well, sticking with my Eurovision theme, you are good to go, Marc.
Okay, sweet. It's great to meet everyone. I saw someone was from San Francisco, which is cool. I was in San Francisco last week. I'm in Victoria, Canada. I don't know if anyone's been there, but close to Vancouver. But yeah, no, it's really nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me. And it was great to meet. It's great to meet everyone. So I'm super excited. Let's see if I can share my screen here. And I'll give a brief introduction. So I'm Marc. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Scalar.com. Richard mentioned that previously I co-founded a company with my current co-founder today. His name's Cameron. We've been working together for 8 years now. We started a website builder and AI logo maker. We grew it while I was in school. It was funded by my student loans. And it was crazy. We grew to 1,000 paying customers in 8 months. And then we were acquired by Namecheap. And then at Namecheap, we spearheaded building their website builder and AI logo maker and a bunch of other products. So I don't know if anyone likes Namecheap. I love Namecheap. All my domains are there. But yeah, and then last year, Cameron and I started Scalar. We wanted to pretty much give everyone Stripe level API documentation, and we wanted to make API testing, documentation, and discoverability less fragmented and more coherent, especially with product-led founders. So we're builders at heart, and we build all the time. So I'm super excited if anyone is using Open API spec or Swagger, message me. I have lots to show. And so I'm going to share my whole, I don't have slides, but I have tabs. So we're going to share my whole window. So hopefully, can everyone see?
Yeah, it's coming up for me.
Can you see the GitHub?
Scalar.
I have the chat open.
Yeah.
Okay. Sweet. So here's Scalar. Oops. So here's Scalar's open source repo. You can go to github.com/scalar/scalar. Bring your Open API specification, and we give you Stripe level docs. We have tons of integrations. This is what the hosted platform looks like. We built a Notion-like editing experience, which is fantastic. But the open source part, you bring your Swagger spec. We give you beautiful documentation really quickly, and we have a testing interface. But that's not the point of this talk, but I just wanted to give some context about how we also have some sweet themes. Like, look at this space theme. Cam just did these. There's like Mars, Blue Planet. Anyways, so the whole purpose of this talk is really around open source large language models and open source AI, and kind of how things have changed so much in the last few years. But just a really brief introduction. Large language models, what are they? They're, GPT, generative pre-trained transformers. What's a transformer? Well, it's a special kind of neural network. What's a neural network? A neural network, it's effectively, neurons in your brain. There's some input, then an activation happens, and then there's an output. In reality, this is what it looks like. You have your inputs. So this would be a vector or something. And a vector has magnitude and direction. So you could think of like when you're going 30 kilometers east, 30 kilometers per hour east, the direction part there is east. The magnitude, or scalar, which is kind of where we have our name, is the physical quantity representation. So a neuron takes in an input, and it has these weights. So these are just floating point numbers. And then the actual neuron sums each of the inputs with the associated weight, and then it applies some sort of activation function. So it'll apply it. So a typical one could be like a unit step function, or a really easy one, a classic one is is this a cat photo, right? So the photo gets turned into a vector, and then it goes through the neural network, which has a lot of these neurons. And then at the end of it, it'll say yes or no, was this a cat? So there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens there. It's a lot of magic, but these weights, which I'll be talking about later as parameters, are really, really important for neural networks. So that's a neural network, and a large language model is a generative pre-trained transformer. And then what's a transformer? So in 2017, this amazing paper was released called "Attention is All You Need" by the great folks at Google Brain. And essentially they came up with what would absolutely change the entire world of as we see it today, is really this right here. So it's a special kind of neural network for predicting next sequences of text. So it's got an encoder decoder layer, and this is the transformer. So it's a special model architecture of a neural network. And I'll drop this paper because it's really interesting, and I highly recommend people reading it. And so this was in 2017. OpenAI released GPT-2 beta in around, this is 2019. And GPT-2 was a really exciting moment because I mentioned before that a neuron has weights, which is a parameter, and this has 1.5 billion parameters. And each parameter, if you go back here, this weight could be represented as like a 32-bit floating point number. So you have, 1.7 billion 32-bit floating point numbers. That's a lot of information and compute, right? So these are really, really big models. And this was a really exciting paper. I highly recommend everyone reading this announcement and talking about generative text here. It's really exciting. But if you don't want to dive too much into the math, there's something even more exciting, which is Andre Karpathy, who works at OpenAI right now and is a fantastic person. I'm so excited to talk about this. They actually built Nano GPT, which you can take the weights, so all the parameters from GPT-2, load them here and run it all open source, and you can train it yourself. Not only that, but Karpathy did a full video, 2 hours, going over how to do it from scratch, and walks through all the math and everything. It's such an amazing video. Came out last year around the time GPT-4 came out. But this isn't necessarily fully open source, right? We know that OpenAI with GPT 3.5 and 4, they haven't released their weights or anything. But last year we had a very exciting moment with open source, which was Meta released Llama. And Llama's architecture pretty much changed the entire world of open source. These models are really big. GPT-4, I think it's speculated, if you Google it, it's probably like, I think they say like 1 trillion parameters. It's like huge, right? Like it's way too big. Llama released a whole bunch of models going from 7 billion parameters to 65 billion parameters. And this architecture, along with Falcon, there's a few others, was really exciting for the open source community, because if you go to Hugging Face, which is something else I'd recommend, is where you can go and see open source models. It goes over, not only do people, Mixtral is amazing too. I highly recommend everyone. There's so much stuff. I'll drop all these links later. But essentially, all these weights, architectures are open source. People are talking about how to build them. And then what goes ahead with open source, which is really beautiful and which is why I love it so much, is that not only is it accessible from people being able to look at it, but then also people are going to be, not everyone has the same compute power as Google or OpenAI or these other companies, right? So then there's this challenge now of, okay, how can I run a 65 billion parameter model or a 7 billion parameter model on the compute that I have, which is maybe my MacBook or something. And a lot of novel techniques went into around this thing called quantization, which I mentioned. Each of those weights for 32 bits. That's a lot. If you can represent 32 bits in 4 bits, that's a lot smaller. So the open source community and the researchers around the world figured out how to do quantization and make bigger models run on smaller compute. And I won't dive too much into that because it's pretty crazy. But if you want to run all these wonderful open source models yourself, I'd highly recommend checking out Ollama. It's like, I think right now it's only for Mac, but I think there's going to be other ones. But essentially, you can grab Mistral or Llama 2, Mixtral, all these kind of open source LLMs, and run them on your MacBook. And the whole idea with this is you're now running a large language model offline. There's no requirement for the internet, and it can run on your compute, which is really exciting for accessibility, which I'm super excited about. So yeah, how many parameters does GPT-4 have? It's like 1.76 trillion parameters. But the whole idea here is that Llama 2 was released recently, and it's performing, getting close to GPT 3.5. So we're able to run much smaller models on your computer that's comparable to some of the state-of-the-art closed source models. So it's a very exciting time for open source LLMs. And the only issue when I was preparing for this talk is that things are moving so fast. I think yesterday, Meta released Code Llama 2, or I guess I should say Code Llama, like the newest billion parameter model, which performs amazing. So the kind of issue with this talk that I was giving is more so I wanted to give a brief history on it, kind of what some of the terminology means, and then really just where to look, because things are moving so fast. So it's really just kind of a resource talk. There's new things being released every day. There's new novel techniques for fitting bigger models on smaller compute, and it's really exciting. But Ollama is one place that I highly recommend looking. I'll drop all of these in the discussion after. Here's a Twitter account that I follow that does AI research paper tweets. I highly recommend following them. They tweet all about new models. Also, Rohan Paul, if you want to get into the more nitty-gritty machine learning stuff, they do a great job talking all about open source LLMs and how it works. Benchmarks, human eval is the kind of how do we benchmark large language models. Someone discussed, you can really see that if something was written by AI, and I agree, you can definitely see it. But it's getting better, and we're going to be able to have this like human in feedback loop training where we'll be able to have a better foundational point. But yeah, so essentially, why does Scalar, why does the CEO of Scalar know so much about this? Why is this something that he's interested in? First of all, I love open source. I think for me, always building things that are more accessible is kind of like the cornerstone of our company. We want to make design accessible. We want to make better documentation accessible. We want to make APIs just more accessible. And my focus in school was around machine learning, specifically statistical analysis and pattern recognition and statistical learning. And I think it's just a really exciting period where things that might have been impossible before are seemingly more accessible now. So it's just a really exciting field to be in. And I think that it's something to pay attention to. And so if you're thinking about adding, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and go back. So I guess if you're thinking about adding large language models or you're interested in them, I think going around and looking to see what's out there. I hope some of these are helpful, and everyone's got different use cases, especially around fine tuning. So yeah, I just think it's a really exciting field, and I think it's only going to get more and more accessible and faster. And I think someone's running like Llama 2 on their iPhone or something. They have like it quantized all the way down. So it's just like, it's crazy. It's super exciting that these models can run offline and aren't closed source. So that's the kind of gist of the talk. Mostly around questions. I'm curious what people think.
Awesome. Yeah, it's really good to kind of put it in historical perspective, right? Because a lot of people try to start explaining it just from theory, but it's actually like math, right? If you do the history, it actually makes it more accessible. So I think thank you. It was a really good approach. Yeah, so I have a question because I know you guys obviously are with Scalar. Great name, by the way, because scalars are just way easier than vectors. I have so much trauma from doing vector linear algebra.
Oh yeah, I love linear algebra. It was like my favorite course. So it's tricky though. It's so different. It's like so abstract.
Yeah, it's well, I passed the exam.
Nice.
I'll put it to you that way. Little did I know. Yeah, so we're experimenting with kind of an AI content engine at the moment. We are ingesting a whole bunch of our podcast content and building a little chatbot. Presumably, you guys are running LLMs to power what Scalar does, right? Generating the initial version of documentation, taking away the toil, all that sort of stuff. The question is for people thinking about doing this and doing this with, I guess, a DevRel aspect, right? Let's say you're a developer advocate or you're a DevRel leader, and the CEO comes to you and gives you budget and says, "Hey, you know, we need to start doing some generative AI stuff around our APIs or our documentation. I want you to build something." The big challenge is, where do you run the LLM, right? I'm using Amazon Bedrock. It's kind of expensive, but I'm just using it because I have no clue where to run do you guys run the stuff yourselves or what?
Yeah, so it's interesting because, so to answer the question directly, yeah, we run it ourselves. We run it on GCP, but there's lots of other places to run it, right? But it's not so much where to run it. It's like, can we get smaller models?
Right. Yeah.
Because that's going to be cheaper to run. So so the whole idea around this is, right now it's very interesting to think of like the cost just looking at like in the economics, the cost comparison of running your own model, fine-tuning your own model versus something like GPT-4 or like some Anthropic's models or something. Just being cognizant of that again, and also the requirements. As for like the generative content, I think, to PJ's point, I think everything needs to be authentic and it should really come across as genuine. And so I think, like, depending on what you're trying to generate, it's important to keep that in mind. I don't have like GPT running my Twitter or anything like that. So, or like, you know.
Yeah. Sorry, that was a completely selfish question, of course, because it's just something that I've been trying to do. PJ, I don't know if you want to come in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, first of all, Mark, that was an awesome talk. Thank you so much for that, because the deep dive, I think, is the part that gets missed a lot. Like, I think that's like the LLM part is the mystical thing that people don't talk about, because they're so busy getting like the AI product marketing brand thing out there. So thank you so much for going into that and explaining exactly how all these things work together, and for the proselytization of open source, which is also close to my heart because it's the best thing ever. But yeah, I think my big question is how practical is open, or not open source, how practical is like a large language model to a startup that, say, is still building, like still figuring out what their main business logic is, what their main function is? Is that something that they maybe want to wait to see how interaction with end users is going to go, or is it something they should consider now before it's too late?
That's a fantastic question. There's kind of this thread that's been with, like, so Cameron and I have been working together 8 years. We've been building products together, and like the really big thing for us is whenever we introduce or do any kind of marketing around AI is like, are we giving our users superpowers? Just like slapping AI onto your thing, it feels very ingenuine. So I think something to, I guess, to answer that question is like, it's not so much of will AI give, like, can I use AI in this product? It's like, the way that I think about it is like a tool, and it's like, are we able to give our users like a 10, 20x experience with this kind of novel means? And to be honest, like a lot of the times it could really just be around like design or user experience or onboarding or communication, like really honing in on the product. But there's also a lot of times where you can get this, like, I would call a great product experience magic. And then you can also have that with AI too. So we're going to be releasing our own open source large language model. This is classic, trademark next month.
Awesome.
and it's going to be fully offline. You can run it on. You should be able to run on your computer. It's going to be a 7 billion parameter model, and it's going to be around. You give it an open API specification, and it'll start scaffolding out documentation. The whole idea around it is giving you a starting point. This is by no means like any sort of replacement, and it's really for like the smaller engineering teams that don't maybe have the capacity to start writing documentation. And so a lot of the times, so the whole reason why this is extremely important is because they want to give their users a Stripe experience. They want them to easily integrate with their APIs, right? But maybe they don't have the capacity right now to write the documentation. So this is really just a starting point, and it's so much easier to build off of a starting point than looking at a blank canvas.
That makes sense. That makes sense. The other question that I had for you was, do you feel like now, if you look back like 5, 6, 7 years ago, a lot of people are like slapping, because you kind of mentioned slapping the AI sticker on the brand, like, oh, we have a AI backed, blah, 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 that's helping you to discover CPU flop in your blah. But it wasn't really AI. It was just a simple algorithm. And none of it was, based on an LLM. None of it was about machine learning at all. It was all about, do you think that that's hurt AI as it actually becomes like AI?
That's a fantastic question. It reminds me of that meme where it's like a crack in the wall and it's like statistics, and then it zooms out, and then it's like a frame, and then it's like machine learning, and then it zooms out even more, and there's a crowd, and then it's like AI. So it's kind of around. I would say the noise is good. I think there's always going to be. For me, I'm just excited people are talking about it. And I think it's gone to a whole new point where so many people are interested in it. There's so many people ask me about matrix algebra and linear algebra now. It's like a dream come true, because I'm like I have all these matrix algebra books, and I love math so much. So it's been really fun seeing that. I think from the product perspective, you're totally right. A lot of people will be like, oh, we added AI, and it's like, yeah, it's some sort of heuristic. It's not even like a true. Yeah, it's just a sprinkling. But I think at the end of the day, it's really about making something that's magical and helps the users. So it could be called anything. But yeah, I think all of the hype has been both good and interesting. I think there was I don't know if did that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I think that to boil it down, what you're saying is there's no such thing as bad press when it comes to AI. Maybe that part's not. Maybe I'm really overgeneralizing on that, but
yeah. I think
when it comes to product-backed AI.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Someone asked about, do you think bringing the conversation of the ethics of open versus closed source to the AI scene will help people examine the ethics of the use of AI in general? I think this is a fantastic question. I think open source, especially for something as impactful as these huge large language models that are like just completely changing the landscape of technology. I think it's really great to have so much effort being put into open source. And I think when something is open and people can look at it, and in one of the Andre Karpathy's videos, he walks through building Nano GPT, but you can load in GPT-2's weights right into that and then start training it yourself. I think that's like a kind of a smaller example, but all of the open source work that's happening on like Hugging Face or Facebook or AKA Meta is releasing, I think it's great. And I think there's just going to be more conversation and more work on kind of like, where is this data coming from? Like having the data set, all of the parts of fine-tuning, or sorry, not fine-tuning, training these models open source, you get a lens into what's going on versus something that is kind of a mystery. And I think it's really important to accelerate the conversations all around that. I don't know if that answered the question directly. I love open source, though. I'm a huge open source fan. So it honestly, I remember like last year, if you go from last year, if someone was like, oh, you're going to be able to run Llama on your MacBook, Mark, I'd be like, oh, that actually sounds impossible. But here we are, and it's like so cool because people are doing like quantization methods, and it's just I'm a huge accessibility fan, so this is really exciting for me.
It's a really great question because one thing that I was very afraid of all of last year was large corporations governments controlling all this stuff, right? It's not like Ruby back in the day where, hey, anybody can fire up a Ruby server, right? It was democratic from the word go, but I felt this fear that, oh, this stuff will always be there'll always be gatekeepers around this tech. So it's wonderful to hear that actually that isn't going to happen. And hey, the power of math, right? It's just, you can just squeeze it down, make it smaller. You're building your own LLM. I mean, obviously you don't have to tell us anything proprietary, but it'd be interesting to understand the scale of that effort in terms of how many people. Is it crazy money? I mean, you're a startup, so it can't be that bad.
Yeah, that's a great question. So essentially, all of my focus in university and pretty much over the last like 6 years has been I got to spearhead a lot of the machine learning at Namecheap as well. Yeah. So it's been something that I've put a lot of time into my like extra hours, whichever extra hours I have as a startup founder. But it's something that I really care a lot about. So all of last year, I was kind of just, I had a pulse on like the bleeding edge of open source LLMs. And it's been like a year effort, and especially around synthetic data that I've been building. I guess we've been building in-house for this model. And so I would say it's like a lot of effort, but I don't know how to, it's just like, the open source community is amazing, and there's so much great tooling out there, and there's all these fantastic papers that you can go and look to. And like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if like next week there's like a crazy new model that drops from Meta or Mistral, where they drop the weights, and it's like just as good as GPT-4. I mean, we're getting very close, and it can run a lot on smaller compute.
What would scare me about doing it is, I mean, did this happen to you where, I don't know, you spend 2 months of effort and what comes out is corrupted in some way? And I mean, the kind of DevX debug cycle seems a bit kind of long, right?
Yeah, totally. I just wanted to wish Liz a good luck on their job interview. Hope you crush it.
Good luck, Liz.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming. I think it's like totally this is one of the biggest problems with machine learning is like the cycle. And this is probably how maybe scientists feel when they're doing tests in the lab and they got to wait like a week or a month or results. That whole kind of cycle, development cycle in this case, is very slow. So I think the wonderful thing you can do though is you can do chunked versions of it. So you don't need to do like a full train on the model, right? You can kind of get a lot of insights as you're watching the loss curve. So how far away your predictors are from the actual source of truth or your evaluation data set. So you can do a lot of things that kind of put you in the right direction. But yes, it is slow, and you're dealing with a monster amount of data. So it's like a lot of late nights. I will say that. I spent a lot of late nights, but it's been good.
Yeah, I mean, dude, I'm only building like a RAG system and just setting up the cycle to feed it through, and then, oh man, I need to embed it in a different way, right? So
are you using LangChain, or what are you using for the RAG system?
Super brain dead. I found a nice little TypeScript repo. So it's actually I literally just handwritten chunking code, mostly for the learning experience, right? So yeah, I mean, I don't know how applicable it is down the road, but it's just a very different style of software development. Totally. As a DevRel, I'm used to like instantaneous feedback, live coding, talks, right? All that sort of stuff, right? You know what I mean, PJ, right? This whole thing where you're like, okay, I'm going to let this run for an hour, and if I get it wrong, it's going to cost me $100 on Amazon, and it's still going to be rubbish. It's a different experience. If
you're doing I would definitely like some advice that I've just like learned over the little bit. If you should be able to do a lot of RAG stuff on like you should check out some of the models I talked about that you can run locally, and you could probably get pretty far with at least the system in place. such that you know that you can get a good gist of the output even on a less performant model. So you can reduce that dev speed and reduce your cost, and you could be like, okay, cool, the RAG is working, like your retrieval augmentation is working, and how you're feeding it in and everything's working, and then you just upgrade it to like an amazing model. And sure, maybe the model has different prompt variants, but you'll be able to get a good feeling in there. But LangChain they have a TypeScript stuff too, and there's like a million vector databases out there. So I don't know how you're doing it, but we could chat offline.
I'm such a tourist. I'm such a tourist. I'm just the early stages of hacking, right? Get out the soldering iron and see what happens.
No, that's super exciting. That's the best time. That's the best time hacking. I love it.
I mean, I'm still learning stuff like your talk, right? Absolutely fabulous.
Sinead, I had a question.
I don't know if you had one more.
Great talk, Mark. Yeah, exactly. Yefim has 2 questions there, Mark, for you. We love Yefim, and he loves maths. So he has his basic calculus and linear algebra, and what other fields of mathematics are prerequisites for him to understand his AI more. And then a simple question to round off the evening: how to deal with the existential fear on a human level associated with AI advancements.
Okay, I'm gonna answer the first one the first question first. So I think that's great.
We'll dedicate an entire meetup and bring on some philosophers.
That's what I was gonna say. So for the first one, I think that's fantastic. The basic calculus and linear algebra, that's the foundation of it. I think MIT has a whole bunch of open courses online with like calculus, Calc 1, all the way to Calc 4, matrix algebra, statistics. And I think if you're trying to get a little bit deeper in the technology, in the mathematics behind all the technology, I would definitely recommend going into a little bit more statistics. Pretty much a lot of machine learning is the intersection of like statistics, matrix algebra, calculus, and potentially complex analysis, so imaginary numbers, especially when you're dealing with vectors and subspaces. So I think I'm happy to share. I have a list. I have a few. I've been sharing like this open source courseware that I've been, or not courseware, course list that I've been sharing with people who are interested in learning more. I think also building and hacking is a really fun way too. So there's really great open source data sets called MNIST, M-N-I-S-T. It's like a flower data set, and you can kind of build your own neural network from scratch. And it goes over like all the parts of it, right? You have this image data set, you go over how to kind of augment it or turn it into the proper input for your neural network, training it, you go over training it. It's a really small, tiny data set, so you can run it all on your computer. I think you can even run it in REPL, like on REPL, or I forget what it's called, .com. So yeah, we should definitely chat. You can message me on Twitter, LinkedIn, email marc@scalar.com, and I'd be happy to. And I can also drop all the stuff here for later, for posterity as well. But and then how to deal with the existential fear on a human level associated with AI advancements. I'm definitely an optimist, and I think the most important thing here is like talking about it and how you feel and how it feels. I think that's like the big first step. But I think I'm going to leave it at I'm an optimist. But I think that's a great question.
Can I weigh in briefly? I'll just weigh in briefly. I feel like it's important to remember that humans fear the things that they're not really supposed to be fearing, and tend to not fear the things that maybe they should be.
Yeah. We don't know what's coming around the corner, right? And if you try to build these things, you'll realize pretty quickly they got a long way to go before they're going to be scary. Thank you so much to our speakers. This was really, really awesome. And I too feel very optimistic after your talks today. Thank you so much. This will be recorded and it will go up on devrelmeetup.com if you missed any bits of it, and we'll put links up and all that sort of fun stuff. Okay, the next meetup is Wednesday, February 28th. 6 p.m. Dublin, London time, 1 p.m. Eastern. And kicking off our second one will be Anna Redbond and a colleague from flagsmith.com doing a combo presentation about feature flags, and Christina Monti from PayPal. And we'll put all the details in advance on devrelmeetup.com and on the various social medias. And that, I think, concludes our little meetup, virtual meetup for tonight. Thank you so much, PJ, Mark, Sinead. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Great talk. Thanks so much.